very good morning to all of you here. In today's webinar, so the topic for today is roadmap planning and lessons learned from SAP S4 HANA implementation. Now, to demystify this, we have on the panel today 4 experienced gentlemen in this area. Mr. Venkatesh KL, Vice President SAP leader with 20+ years of experience in leading many large transformation projects. Mr. Sunil Kumar Edda, Vice President, 16+ years of experience, client partner with end-to-end experience of SAP S4 HANA from sales to delivery. Mr. Ashish Srivastav, business process consultant with 18+ years of experience and involved in building a value proposition for SAP S4 programs. Lastly, Mr. Uddhav Suman, Assistant Vice President with 25 years of experience in leading large transformation projects. Now, in today's session, our distinguished guest would be covering some crucial topics like guidelines on SAP S4 planning, real example of SAP S4, lessons learned from implementation, SAP EML, Rise and Activate methodology. So without much ado, let's dive into today's discussion. Over to you, Mr. K.
Thank you, Naveen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I know people are from different part of the world are attending this one. Thank you so much for taking your time. I think this is a very good session. We are, as Naveen mentioned, we are bringing our experience. S4 is a relatively lot of new people are experimenting and learning a lot from adopting S4. I think the group's experience in dealing with this kind of projects is pretty much helpful. Recently, we participated in SAP Insider. There's a lot of people who are trying to understand and share their experience on how these projects are done. I hope we have packaged a lot of content, heavy content in this small 1-hour session. We are going to touch upon most of these topics. You may have deep questions. We can take it as many as we can in this session, but remaining questions you can connect with us. We'll be more than glad to help you through this your particular case or your particular question. So having said that, right, S4 does bring a complete inflection point in terms of the ERP's implementations, right? People have done ECC, the R3 and then ECC. Now they are onto the S4. It has a lot of technological features that you need to be aware of. It is changing from on-premise, the PC version that is changing, plus also extending itself to the external world, right? So it has a lot of new things that you need to be really aware of. I think many projects, they plan to get started, they get stuck in the beginning, and even if they start, they get stuck in the middle, and not all of them which started on time even make it to the end of that one. So I think with that background, let me start with this slide. So this is kind of a circle of life or circle of S4 journey. Starting from left side, I would like to address upon all these aspects. You will start with what are the factors that will compel you or take up this journey of S4 HANA. We'll talk about that one. Then we'll talk about the next biggest thing is, which way to go, right? People are contemplating Greenfield, Brownfield, Bluefield. Let's try to throw some light and demystify what those jargons mean to you. Then, since from the 2021 January, the new buzzword in the ERP world is SAP Rise. Like, SAP introduced this new version of SAP Rise. I think, people have gotten to know what SAP Rise is all about, but we will explain some of the benefits of Rise and how to make Rise successful. The other one, 3-letter jargon that you hear is the EML, stands for Enterprise Management Layer, which is a new name for SAP best practices. It comes with a new package and a new name, so we'll talk about that one. Then I think, we all acknowledge that data, OCM, and business process master list, these are the key components of an ERP. We'll also share our experience on what these things contribute to an implementation project. The SAP Activate methodology, when you are adopting S4 and people are adopting the best practices, SAP Activate methodology does bring in a great value here. We'll talk about it. And the second part of the thing here is global template approach, right? Most of our corporations are globally situated, so Do we start US first? Do we start China first? Do we start Europe? Any country in the Europe? Some of our experiences, we have been through that one, which one to start first, we'll throw some light on that one. And last but not the least, right, how to manage your schedule, timeline, and the budget, right? This is a big project. Definitely takes huge, you'll have your CFO's attention all the time on this kind of initiatives, and the business attentions will touch upon that one. Yeah, no, what is the, this is a huge project that you are going to take up for your enterprise, right? So why should you take this project for an enterprise, and what value does it? The first question that will be asked is, okay, we are going to do an S4 adoption. It is not a small project. The first question is why S4, right? SAP has been has promoting the S4 since last 10+ years. But I think it has caught up momentum right now because we are reaching the end of life as specified by SAP for 2027. So there are various factors. We have put together a few pointers you can utilize this list to prioritize what is the priority for your enterprise. So on the left side that you see, you have end of life cycle is one of the compelling factor for you to take up this journey. Then you talk about the analytics piece, the insight action talks about, there have been a lot of tools playing around in your enterprise for the analytics. SAP has stepped up their game in terms of how they bring the analytics together. So that is another compelling reason. The third one is the process simplification, right? People have customized over a period of time for various reasons in terms of how that contributes to your total cost of ownership, right? You have customized that one. This is an opportunity for you to stick to the standard and limit those customizations to the ones that differentiate you in your industry. Then, the digital platform, we all talk about the digital age here. Can your enterprise, can your ERP system, SAP, can communicate to all the digital needs of the growing business as we speak now? Then business model innovation, like I have spoken to our clients, they say that, our business, when we implemented SAP about 20 years back, was completely different than what we are trying to do, right? What factors to our cost in terms of material cost and how we do the business have changed. So that might be one of the reasons for you to relook at, why you need to do an S4 and, business transformation program. And last but not least, the system consolidation. Many people had, for various reasons, either through an acquisition, mergers and acquisitions, or you had designed to have multiple landscapes in your system. So here's an opportunity. Now you don't think, you need multiple systems. This is an opportunity for you to consolidate, right? So these are the driving factors. On the right side, this is an example. I have reprioritized all these factors. This was an example when one of our clients, these were the priorities for them. The 1, 2, 3 is something that they want to start. The 4, 5, 6, 7 is something they want to it's like crawl, walk, run, right? So you need to get your self grounded on the SAP S4 system. That itself is a huge project before you want to do the transformation or the business model innovation. So this is something that I think, we felt that this would be useful for you. Next slide. So next topic on the is what do we do? Greenfield, Brownfield. I think, recently one of our customers asked us, Bluefield, hey KL, is this something that Yash introduced, right? No, it is not Yash introduced jargon. It's been there. The Bluefield is also there. Typically, most of you can easily ascertain what a Greenfield is, starting fresh, and then Brownfield is a conversion. Like how you did your upgrade from E6 to 5 to 6 and stuff. So you can upgrade, which is called conversion here. There are certain prerequisites to one need to qualify to be selected, to be qualified for doing a conversion. The list that you see in the screen indicate your answers, and that might potentially guide you to the which way you should head towards. By no means this is a checklist that will, that will the final. You definitely need a guidance of an experienced SI who can walk you through these things and much more than what we have put here. What we did was, for one of our customer where we implemented, we tried to answer the same questions that we advise people to look for, and we ended up being in the middle, right? The Bluefield. So there are customers, it's not surprising that they would like to go with a Bluefield, that only means in hybrid approach. So
Oh.
you still want to retain some of your old content, old system, old data, but you want to revamp some of the other things, right? So
Kale, sorry to interrupt, but your voice is breaking in between. If you could just be a little closer to the mic.
okay, is that better?
Yes, it's better.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for telling me that. So the Bluefield is something that people have to. It's a hybrid approach. You are going to, some part of your functionality is going to be like, you're revamping the functionality, but some you would like to take it forward. This slide can be a very detailed topic. We could spend 1 hour talking about each, the pros and cons, and what leads to the greenfield, what leads to the brownfield. We may be able to answer some of your questions in the Q&A, but we encourage you to set up time that we can help you through our experiences and what holds good for your case. So these are some of the questions, like it can tell you, do you want to keep your transaction data history, right? There could be organizations, corporations where compliance is critical. They need to, for various reasons, they need to keep their data and they cannot get away from the data. That could mean millions and billions of dollars of impact to their business. So if that is such a compelling reason, you definitely need to look at this one. So then the second one is the conversion prerequisites. Do you even qualify for the conversion? If not, then you need to go for this one. Then do you want a phased rollout? Because when you convert your system, you are practically going live with all the geographies. So if you want to go with conversion, you need to be prepared that you don't have a choice for a phased rollout. Then your solution enhancement, right? How much do you want to, because in a conversion, you're pretty much carrying forward your core solution. You may have a chance in enhancing it once you finish your conversion project, but that's what this point talks about. Then, it's a complete overhaul of your solution. If your business model has changed, then I think Greenfield is the option. So even if you choose whichever field, I think, not one size fits all here. People may need, different things for different needs. In either case, if you choose Greenfield, you still need to be clear. There are many more other questions that you need to answer. I will take you through in the next slides. So the most interesting topic, right, the Rise and EML. So we want to highlight like what is Rise, what do I get benefited with a Rise offer, right? How to make this Rise successful. Then we'll also talk about the EML, what is EML, and what it does not offer. Next slide. So in terms of this, the Rise, right? Rise is an option that SAP has come up with in the 2021 onwards. You have a couple of versions in that one, right? You have a public cloud or a private cloud. Public cloud, I think it is for the organizations who can adapt to the complete flexibility. You do not have any flexibility in terms of, or very limited flexibility that you have in terms of customizations. We would like to be on organizations, we can adapt to the standard ones. We absolutely don't need any customizations. So I think they can go for public cloud, but in my opinion, most of the large enterprises do not even qualify or do not even fall into this category. They are either looking for a private cloud. So it's the key change in the Rise. SAP is setting up your the hosting as well as the software, right? It's a shared responsibility in terms of the basis work. In the past, your SI, you would have a basis consultant who would install the system, copy the system, or plan all the basis activities. But here, this comes as package with the Rise. SAP hosts the system for you and does some of the things. You do get a detailed activities list, what SAP does and what a client is expected to take care of that one. I think, again, you need to talk to your SI or talk to us in terms of what are those responsibilities. So this is another aspect that you will get now. In terms of the Rise, also you need to, like now you have the other advantage, the BTP, a lot of software. So you need to be aware of what are the components that come along with this one. So if you can go to the next slide, we can talk about, just go to the next slide. Though. Yes, no. Can you come to the previous one? Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, how to make the SAP Rise successful. So I think when it comes to the Rise, I think it's important for you to understand the private cloud or the public cloud option first. I think that's the first and foremost one. As an organizations, are you prepared for this option, right? So fully understand. I think either the SAP or the SI who's involved in helping you through this software sales will take you through a 100-point checklist in terms of what does the private cloud option offer you. I think that's important for you to understand. I think it is done in the Discord phase, which SAP does, but we strongly recommend that you also have an advisory from an SI who will let you know the things that you probably miss out, going through that 100-point checklist. Then I think, you also need to look at your architecture, because SAP Rise comes with your CPI and, the SDI, a lot of software components, the architecture has changed. So you need to also look at your current state of architecture with the on-premise or the future state on the cloud. Which components will lie on the cloud, which components lie on-premise, right? Those are the things that you need to be aware of. And even, are you prepared for the Rise? If not, I don't think, SAP, at least SAP is promoting heavily the Rise one, but there are customers who also have chosen on-premise. So if you have specific questions, debate on this one, we can talk it in the Q&A. There are certain limitations, not limitations, but things that you need to work, right? It's not easy when you split the basis aspect of the SAP, because ERP is a core to your organizations, like it's like a backbone to your organizations or the nervous system of your organizations. You may need to make so many changes, right? In your project, S4 project, you may realize you need one additional point for testing in the UAT phase. In the past, you could ask your basis system who could create a new client, overnight, and then you are ready with the next day. But here, there's a process that you need to work. There are SLAs within SAP. So if I can draw your attention on the manage the change on the point 3, roles and responses between SAP and the customer need to be understood, because we need to create a ticket with the SAP. SAP has an SLA on which before they can make that available. So there's a whole lot of process that you need to aware. If we have not factored in all the time that it takes to do work with the Rise, then probably you will, you'll have challenge in managing your schedule here. So I strongly suggest that if you're planning your project, involve the SAP team in terms of or the SI who understands how the Rise works. Accordingly, they are integral part. They are part of your steering committee meetings. They will help you through this process in terms of making sure the hardware does not become a constraint for your S4 implementation. Yep. And the last but not the least, you should factor in every project manager on the earth does factor in some buffer. I think you should factor in some time that helps you there. Next slide. So this is EML we talked about, right? EML is a new buzzword that SAP has come up with, which is a new name for best practices. For people who are new to best practices, I'm sure not many people are new to best practices, but at the same time, there are people I know they may know best practices, but not necessarily have done their implementation using best practices. It can controlling your implementation purely with best practices alone can bring down your cost anywhere between 30 to 40%. But I think people, SIs who have done this one, it's like a religion. You need to follow this meticulously and very religiously. When you are trying to adopt this best practices approach, there are certain do's and don'ts. So that's why it's important to understand this. Just we are trying to use the best practices. People say that they know best practices, but I think in a true format, there are very few people who are adopting that one. I think this is the time that you should understand what the EML is about and how there are pre-configured scenarios that you get here. If I can draw your attention on each of the box here, you have these are part of it has certain cost element associated with it. You should request, you get a checklist, you get an Excel sheet on the list of the best practices that are part of the EML. You need to check which is optional, which one is mandatory, which one is out of scope, which one costs additional software, everything that you can do it and work with SAP to have those installed in your system. It is available for 53 countries, and I think in 25 languages it is available. It also comes with documentation, in terms of the test scripts and in terms of the business process, that you can readily utilize that one. So that can cut down. And not to mention, it has a pre-configured processes that are already there. You don't need to follow your account determination process because account determination configuration itself can take a hell lot of time. So if you follow this one, the chart of accounts, account determination, a lot of things can be simplified and your focus is more on the transformation. So that it has multi-country option too. You have for the 43 countries, you have a company code, all the naming conventions that are done, plus also the localization. SAP with extra software called document compliance and reporting. You also get the customization for each of the local countries that are required, like Brazil, Italy, and many other countries that require e-invoicing and many other local statutory requirements that comes as part of this solution. Next slide. I think Uddhav, my colleague, will help us through some of the things that it does not cover.
Yep. Thanks, KL. So as KL mentioned, EML gives a lot of flexibility in adopting the best practices, but however, there are some constraints. What EML does not offer is, like in earlier days, classic days, right? In ECC days, we used to have 000 client, which can be used to adjust your standard configuration. But when you opt for the EML, your 000 client is available. However, all standard configuration is not available as a part of EML because it is country specific. It is process specific. That's why SAP has provided the 000 client, but not all the settings which are available in 000 are available in EML. Second constraint I would say on the EML side is the EML content cannot be loaded as straightforward into a solution manager because it comes pre-configured from the SAP side, and solution manager typically SI has to build. So SI has to use the best practices to load the solution manager, which are scoped as a part of your respective project or the program. Then the last constraint, not the least, but the upgrading the EML is not possible. However, if you upgrade the EML portion or the best practices as per the SAP notes or all those things, you will get the new features and the underlying standard functionality that will get upgraded. However, the EML as such, which is pre-configured for all those 43 countries or whatever the countries your program is in scope, those cannot get upgraded directly. The way earlier days in ECC, when you upgrade, it used to upgrade everything. So these are some of the constraints that what EML does not offer. But rest, I think, it is a lot flexibility that SAP has provided as a part of EML.
Yep. Thanks, Uddhav. So I think just be on this slide, right? I think, understanding these limitations, the whole mindset has to be changed, right? You are not, if you are following the EML approach, best practices approach, you don't even need, SAP says, why do you even need the standard configurations, right? You use the types, the order types, because when we started using the EML, we did not find some of the standard order types that we were used, right? Or the strategies that we used. They said, you use the best practices. It may be a different order type, but it is part of that best practice you should utilize. So, this is the change that you'll realize when you start adopting this one. Initially, it might seem as a limitation, but in long run, you'll get used to it. And it is like, this is a part of life, right? You don't need to create your own thing. So we are trying to cut down the customization.
Correct. And if you have to do with a standard order type or the standard content which are available as a part of our earlier ECC days, then you have to configure right from the scratch. But however, with EML, you get all the dependent configuration as is, and you can straightway run your business scenario. That's the advantage with working with EML.
Unless your requirement justifies that custom creation, custom design, every organization has their unique differentiators. In that case, you should definitely try to do that. Next slide. So we are heading to the next section of this one, where we are talking about the data, the BPMLs, and the OCM part, right? So one of the key things, everybody, most of the people who have been part of such large implementations do understand the data plays a vital role in the success of this project, right? And with the S4 coming in, or any ERP project, this holds good for not just for S4, but even for any project, right? So it's important to have your data in order before you start, because if the only advice that we would recommend is, please do the data project prior to the SAP project, that can cut down your lot of burn rate on the project, because you are not burning the entire project team while your data is still getting ready for the data loads and the mocks. So the few pointers that we would like to, based on experience, get the data governance or establish the team that is going to handle the data in place. At least the core master data that you can have. You can choose to go with an MDG tool that you know, or even the process that you, otherwise a basic process that you follow in your organization, that should be good enough. Then the tools and the process. Tools, you can choose. The process is what I wanted to make. Once you have a team, they will put the process in place. The next one, the cleansing part. What helped in one of our recent implementation was getting the deduplications and harmonizing the data, right? Because this is a small, it's a small sentence, but it has a huge impact on that one. You need to work with your multiple layers of the business teams. This, when you are adopting the S4 with the Greenfield, what will the material code, because in the past people had the same material code for the US and for the same material, the UK had created a new material code for that one, right? How will that work? We still need 2 different codes, or do we want one? So it's a huge effort that will take a lot of time and iterations to the business stakeholders. So we would strongly recommend that you have this pre-project and get this thing in shape so that you can make this. This doesn't become a bottleneck when you start your S4 journey. Yep. Next one. So OCM, I think everybody recognizes the OCM part. We are going to OCM typically has stakeholder management, communication management, training. But what I want to highlight in this slide is, if you choose to take up the Greenfield, I think, in both the cases, either you take the Greenfield, Brownfield, or the Bluefield, availability of business stakeholders is critical to any transformation program. However, in the Greenfield, you will need a lot more time from your business stakeholders because you are revamping your entire solution. And if you're taking a multi-year project, if you haven't had full dedication from the people, because you're setting off a journey to redefine your enterprise resource management ERP system, and if you do not have the full commitment from the business, you will not be able to, you'll be stuck, in this process. So work through your business leaders, business stakeholders in terms of their availability. How much time. There will be some. The following slide, I do have a sample slide, sample team structure. But before I go there, you definitely need to have that commitment. And the last part is backfilling, right? You may think, okay, we will need this one, but who's going to do their day job, right? That is something that you need to work in advance. That's what we want to highlight. And the last but not the least, with I think I did see a report from Accenture or McKinsey that the huge dearth of SAP S4 skilled resources in the industry in general, not with any specific SIs, and that makes things more difficult. But however, if you have a lead time, if you plan in advance, I think every SI can be successful in terms of working that challenge out. That's just a word of experience that we want to bring it here. Next slide, Uday. So this is just customer side of the resources, right? Depending on the size of your organizations, you can have few more boxes, or you can have a more compressed boxes here. But the project leadership, which is kind of known to everybody, you will definitely have a project leadership with the key business stakeholders. And the next one is the PMO. Just one note of caution here. I try to give few examples of what are the typical type of teams that will be involved. It is not a comprehensive list that one should have. The PMO is like, you need to have a program manager and a project manager who are part of this one, integration lead, somebody who represents master data, and the OCM lead training and the security and reporting. This team forms your PMO. Let's focus on the core team, right? This core team is what we're doing. If you choose to Greenfield, you will need a dedicated people from these work streams. This is just a sample work stream. It could be more than this one. You need this core team who are dedicated to this project. Then on the right side, these are the part-time or as-need basis. you will need expertise on, because the core team not necessarily is your subject matter expertise. Sometimes they could be, but not necessarily they are the subject matter experts. So you could be pulling this knowledge from multiple people. So you need to earmark who are the people for the create a matrix that represents your finance and accounting, treasury, because just in SAP S4 world, we talk about finance and controlling FICO as a big umbrella that has so many, at least 10 streams that you need the expertise. So that you need to identify who represents that one. Then the work stream that you have a lot of interfaces, banks, Concur, many interfaces. You need to have a person who represent that one, because it's just not the functionality, but you need to work, what is the inbound and the outbound communication that need to happen. So these are the teams that you need to put in place for your successful journey, just to give you an idea on the team structure. Next slide. So business master, I think Uddhav, you just want to highlight about how you can do that one, and I'll add to some.
Correct. So business process master list is one of the key factor which help you to smoothen your implementation. What it means that before start of project, if you are able to list down your what are the different processes that you would like to implement as a part of your whatever option you pick up or choose, right? Greenfield, Brownfield, or the hybrid one, the Bluefield. But if you come out with your business process master list, it will give a clarity what processes that you need to basically implement as a part of your implementation journey, as well as what are the processes that you need to standardize and harmonize across the globe, because majority of the corporates have the global operations footprint. So in earlier ECC days, right, we have a typical BPML which will be created up to 6 level, right, from starting from your SAP module functional area till the transaction code level. But with this SAP S4 that is coming into the current state of the mind, right? So we have the 4 levels that is SAP has provided the business process master list to be created in 4 levels, which starts basically from line of business, because nowadays with S4, everyone talks about the line of business, the business area, and the scope item. Scope item is basically nothing but the identifier which is given for the specific best practices in individual modules. And then you will have the detailed description. So that's why it is at 4 level, whereas earlier days it was up to 6 level, because it goes up to the transaction code level and even up to the security access control level as well. So this is basically a difference between a classic BPML versus the SAP S4 BPML.
And I think that's what they call it as EML now. So correct. The EML will have the scope items listed. I think it's as part of the discover phase. You should try to know, what are the things that you would like to adopt now, the best part, because that is part of your EML. If you decide, then SAP will be able to install them for you. The other word is, this can also be a pre-project. Typically, we would recommend, if you think, you're planning to start your S4 journey in 2023, and I don't have anything to do, probably pick up this project or the data project where you can start putting together your BPML. This will definitely be a big helpful when you start doing your discovery phase. Next one. So yeah, the Activate methodology, right? I think, we have seen, the typical waterfall, a lot of methodologies. Then the ASAP has been there for a long time. People have flavored the ASAP into their own processes. What we would like to highlight here is, this is like your ISOs and CMMIs, right? It's like ISO is not great or the CMMI is great. It's just the process. You need to have a strong process that meets your requirement. And SAP Activate is completely focused towards fit to standard. If this is, most of you, I think it has reduced. You do not need to bring up any templates. SAP Activate methodology in the rapid.sap.com. You have all the ready-to-use templates, all the ready-to-use checklist, all the ready-to-use the gate checks that you need to do. I think once you need to customize at some places based if you're doing a fit to standard or a fit to gap. And as I said, there may be some fit to standard and there may be some fit to gap. So according to this one, not manipulate, adjust your methodology, the Activate methodology to meet your needs. Otherwise, I think the standard SAP Activate methodology should give you a ready reckoner or the jump start for your methodology perspective. The the one experience that I have noticed is in the discover phase, typically a customer is engaged only with SAP in terms of deciding the software BOM. I would strongly suggest you need to have a SI who's going to implement the software for you, or the key. If you have in-house architects who understand this one, they should be part of this discover phase to determine what is the EML that you would like to adopt. So that will help you in terms of control. If you have not focused on the planning side, then I think you will see a lot of variations during the execution of the project. The other aspect is rest of the stuff remains. You actually in the Activate methodology, if you fit to standard, as we talked about, use the ready configuration, demonstrate that one and note down the changes and tweak those changes. And for the ones that you fit to gap, you come up with a sort of a blueprint and then try to do those things. But the Activate methodology blueprinting should be very minimal. It is like show and tell, and then go with the realize and then deploy and run. Next. A couple of points we talked about, again, this can be a big debate, but I just wanted to, did not want to put a lot of text here around what we want to say and dilute it. The only point here is, if you're planning, do we want to are you when you are trying to implement the S4, if you have a global presence, how do you want to start it? There are organizations who would like to create a global template, which could be ranging from 3 months to 6 months, depending on what is the scope of the global template. So you decide the global template and then you start rolling out to each of the country. That can be an option, but there are companies who decide, okay, we have two examples, probably Sunil can throw some light on, where one organization did a global template build and then started to roll out. It has its own advantages. And then there's another organization which deployed the SAP for the US because they thought the rest of the world pretty much have the similar processes that the US follows. So then they would like to do that. And also they could not pull in all the business resources from the globe because it was a newly formed organizations. They did not have a lot of business resource that they could create a global template. I think this is a visual that, this talks about it in a typical global template. There are certain common processes that you try to focus on and build a global template. And then when you do a rollout, you update the global template with what are the changes that is going on. So that's in a nutshell is what you see in this slide. So I think I turn this over to my colleague Sunil to help throw some experiences that we had with respect to timelines and budget planning. Over to you, Sunil.
Hey, thanks, Gail. Again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're actually joining. So I want to spend a couple of minutes just to actually touch base on this topic. I think most of the key things, right, for any big ERP implementation, two key things are keeping the timeline intact and budget intact. So we want to share our experience on what will actually help with these two regards. Before I actually go in, probably I want to show typical timelines for two projects that we executed. Can we go to the next slide? This is for one of the clients that we're doing. So the global design phase, if you look at, right, so this is like KL mentioned, this is a client which actually took the global design approach. This is just a representation. But if you look at it, I think they're just going with the global design approach first. Typically takes like 5 to 6 months where you're essentially grouping up all the countries together, all the BPOs together to find out what is a common template that can be actually be applicable to all the countries. And then you actually go out and start implementing and rolling out to each of these countries. So just in terms of timeline, right? So the point that we want to highlight is we're not telling that this option is better or that option is better. But if you're actually going towards a global design approach first, probably you should plan for 6 months to finish this global design template. And for the size of the company, I think this is around $2.5 to $3 billion company, just for your reference. Of course, it depends upon each company, individual complexity, the number of countries that you have, the complexities involved, the type of business that you're involved. But we just want to give you a sample so that you can actually do a mental math on probably when you're planning. This might come in handy. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next client is around $2.3 billion company, operates in around four continents. and probably 8 to 9 countries. They took a different approach. I think this company not only are actually embarking on an S4 HANA journey, but they also did a lot of transformation, business transformation themselves. I think they want to consolidate around 40 company codes they had earlier. So they want to bring it up to around 20. So there's a lot of transformation that happened from a business itself. I think if you look at the timeline, obviously for the first US, there's a lot of time that they have taken. But please bear in mind that is not that entire timeline is not just for S4HANA project, but they actually also did the first phase of the project. They are actually completely doing the business transformation. And then we started the US journey. I think we'll be going live in the month of November. But then once we do that, I think we already started UK in parallel. And after UK, then we'll go to Germany, Austria, and France and Italy. Okay. But one of the other thing that I want to tell you in each of these phases is before we actually started the project, like KL mentioned, each of these phases, we are actually doing a readiness phase just to ensure that we are actually taking care of all the preparatory activities that are required before we embark on the journey, whether it is data or whether we are actually getting the processes ready, whether talking to the teams and all of that. So we are actually ensuring there is a 2 to 3 month of planning or readiness phase that we're calling that, so that that will give the required impetus so that we can stick to the timelines of what we actually planned initially. So these are the two slides, I think, just to give you a comparison of the timelines of different approaches. We can go back to the first slide. Yeah. So like anything, right? I think Kale also mentioned this point. I think planning is a paramount if you want to keep your timelines and budgets. It's like to take an analogy, right? It's like a movie, right? So the more amount of time that you spend in pre-production, and if you have a scripted bound and all of that, that'll actually help you go and implement, go and take your movie within the timelines. Similarly, for this project also, the more amount of time that you spend upfront and define and discuss all your key strategies, and if these strategies are in place, whether you're working with an SI or whether you actually have a strong SAP in-house team, if they can actually define and decide like what is the implementation strategy that you're going to deploy, whether it is a Bluefield or a Greenfield, Brownfield, or which methodology that you're going to use, whether you're going to go with a global template approach or whether you want to do a country-wise approach, all of that, if you can plan, decide the pros and cons, I think that will actually help you. And also, if you can fix up what is your landscape strategy, like how many systems you're going to have, how many clients you're going to have, what is the transport mechanism, and all of that, if you can prepare documents well in advance, I think all of these help. Similarly, for OCM and training, right? I think two key things traditionally to identify who are the key stakeholders, whether BPOs or key super users or like end users. If you can map out all the data well in advance of the project, I think that will actually give you a head start and keep the blinkers on so that you're not missing on your timelines and budgets. Data migration, I think very key point. I think we need to have a data migration strategy, which tools you're going to use, which programs or which data. If there is a lot of data that needs to be cleansed before you even start the project, I think all of these things you need to have a strategy in place. What is your UI, whether you're going to use Fury or whether you're going to use standard SAP GUI and all of that. So that UI strategy, I think you need to discuss and debate. Security strategy, testing, cutover. So all of these things, I think I think we can spend 30 minutes on each of that. But I'm telling you, giving you a high level overview that if you can actually sit around your team and discuss and debate and conclude on all of these topics before you start the project, I think that will help your timelines and budgets to plan better. I think discover phase, I think this is a key point again. If it is possible, I think you can engage the SI well in advance so that they can also help you in fixing up what is the software bound components, and also decide some of the future S4 architecture components, like whether it is CPI or smart data integration or Fury and all of these things. I think they can actually guide you if you can include your SI. But if you have a very strong SAP architect team in-house, I think you can actually involve them as well. Okay. And then I think SAP Rise, I think this is a new thing that came up, I think last year. I think SAP is offering the SAP Rise program. What it means for the actual implementation, I think the big thing that you'll see a difference is, of course, SAP is more involved than before in the actual execution of your project, because they are the ones who's going to do all your business kind of activities before the SI can actually do something on the weekend or create a new system or create a new instance on the fly. But that thing is no more with the SI right now. SAP themselves are taking care. So that means you need to give enough time to SAP and also stick with the SLAs that you agreed before. So that's why I think planning becomes much more important, especially when you have another big stakeholder, which is SAP in this case, which is actually added to your actual project implementation. Okay. Final point, I want to leave with this thought. I think more clarity on all the strategies, more control on the budget. I think it goes without saying. It will give you a clear indication so that you are also giving a clear direction to the SI and everybody involved, to the stakeholders. If you're clear on all these 6 or 7 points, that will only make things easy for you, because then probably the team can actually just focus on executing the strategies instead of actually being in the mid project and then finding out which is the best strategy that will actually suit you at that moment. Okay. So with that, I think if you have any questions, I think we'll be happy to answer in the end. But with that, I want to actually pass it on to
Yeah.
Ashish, just to give like an approach to value realization of what are the things that you can do. This is probably one of the projects that you can take before starting off your S4 HANA project. But I'll let Ashish talk about it. Ashish, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. So basically, like any initiative, and especially for the initiative like S4 HANA journey, what typically happens, it is a long drawn engagement. Timeline may extend up to a year or more than a year kind of thing, and people get, or the teams get engrossed in the day-to-day activities, and therefore larger focus on what this engagement or this initiative was envisaged for starts losing track. And therefore, in our experience, what we have observed is it is helpful if we understand and create a framework for improving the visibility of the value which the engagement or initiative is trying to capture, and also track it, so that any course corrections or any changes in strategies might be needed. It can be timely discussed, reviewed, and corrected for. So what we have, based on our experience, we have deployed the approach which you saw earlier as SAP, in alignment with the SAP Activate methodology. When you are doing a preparation phase, actually, based on your business, based on your geography, based on your conditions, you need to identify what are the key value drivers which these initiatives are going to impact. Okay, so that becomes very, very important, because typical business processes may have conditioned, can be conditioned to the geography or the specific requirement, and that visibility helps any team or organization in identifying the key levers which are going to get impacted if this initiative is implemented. That is part one. So as a preparation phase or a discovery phase, like we saw earlier, we need to understand those key value drivers. Now, how it helps is, once you identify these value drivers, for example, at a very high level, say my initiative is going to improve my revenues and it will reduce my cost, or it will improve my asset efficiency. So those at a high level, you can call them as a value driver. It also helps us is identifying the key matrices which can be tracked going forward. Now that helps us in two ways. One is businesses are able to baseline their current performance against those KPIs, and therefore whether best practices or benchmarks, we can also identify the gaps available in that. So while we are exploring and we are diagnosing that this activity, this value visibility and realization framework will help organizations in baselining the current performance and identifying the improvement possible through the initiative. This helps in two ways. One is it will help us in tracking on an ongoing basis what differentiation the initiative has realized, which is what's supposed to do or not. And in case there are deviations, what are the course corrections? So that phase we move on to that, say that we realize the intended value capture. And then, of course, then once we move on to the running post implementation phase, we say that, okay, whether those we track and we create a dashboard saying that, okay, the initiatives are intended to improve this much, whether it has achieved the realized expected levels, or any further corrections, course corrections are needed. And therefore, ongoing basis, we continuously monitor and realign as journey for the organization goes on. Now, there are 2 or 3 things during these implementation phases. What we have observed is, irrespective of how much you have planned, right? A typical technology implementation, organizations typically face choices during the phase itself. For example, when I plan that, okay, I need to do this thing in this way, then you will find some multiple options in between. Now, this framework also helps you prioritize and select among those options, which will help organizations capture larger value going forward. So that is the whole framework which we have articulated in terms of various phases through which any transformation journey goes ahead. Now, if we go can you go to next slide? So, for example, for one of the clients, which is basically a global organization, it is into lead recycling operations. What has happened is this organization is around 100 years old and it has grown through various acquisitions, and therefore there are multiple processes across multiple geographies despite having in a similar nature of business. Now those processes are different because of cultural issues, because of technology. Some geographies are having old technology of production, etc. And moreover, different systems across, even ERPs are different across systems. So now this organization decided to move on to S4 HANA journey, and what Sunil was earlier mentioning, this organization took that second approach of saying that, okay, we will have one region as a base, assuming that other geographies, more or less processes will be similar. Now, in this exercise, what has helped in making this implementation through value visibility and realization framework, we were able to identify where are the key gaps, for which processes needs immediate interventions, where is the maximum value getting captured, and therefore prioritize those initiatives. So we help them designing their as-is and to-be processes across value stream, so that, and of course, this was a PE owned private equity ownership structure, and therefore they were also able to appreciate the value concept here. So in interest of time, we can move ahead. Sunil, or if you want to add something here.
So let's go ahead with the questions with your permission, KL and Sunil. So we have Mr. Severa, who's asking, what is your experience in the two implementation, and were there any bad experience in the implementation journey? And he wants to specifically ask in the finance area.
So, yeah, I think I was typing this answer for this one. So let me first tell you, every experience is a learning, right? So, you know, you will learn through every experience. So there's no good or bad. So everything is a learning for us. And I think in our implementations, the finance area, what we encountered was the customer did a business process reengineering with another big five consulting firm, and the big five consulting firm recommended that, hey, you have way too many company codes, you know, you need to like stick to like one or few. And we designed our blueprint for that one. But after 1 month, the business went back and said, no, this does not work out. So I think the lessons learned here is you need to spend time and have a commitment from the business in terms of, because otherwise you would have the entire, you cannot start your enterprise structure in SAP without having the company codes. So that went back and forth. That is why that's a huge timeline that you saw on the timeline slide for one of the client is so long, because as a business, they were not clear in terms of how many they can actually consolidate into. That should be a prior activity before you embark on your things. Once you embark on the S4, it should be mostly a skill-based, what features that you can do in the S4, it should be the challenge, not the how many companies that you want to keep in the SAP. Next one.
Thank you for answering that, KL. So next is it possible to migrate company-specific customization?
I mean, so I believe you're talking about the Bluefield approach. You know, when we have the combination, yes, the answer is yes. There's a selective data transfer. There's a tool that are available. You can pick and choose what you need to do it. But it's a, you know, if you need anything detailed, we need to take it offline. But in short, that's an essence.
Right. So Mr. Rakesh is asking, could you tell me the difference between on-premise and cloud platform? How different are those, and which would be better when considering your implementation or rollout?
It's a very big question. It's an enterprise strategy in terms of where they want to go. It's a decision of the organizations whether they want to be they want to stay on premise or they want to move on to a cloud. There are reasons why customers want to stay on premise for various reasons. There are such a large organizations for the data privacy, plus they want to have control on their own hardware. So then it's an on-premise. But if you would like to look at, okay, the cost benefits and the technology, how the hyperscalers can ramp up and ramp down based on your business dynamics, then I think cloud is a better choice. So just remember, not one size fits all. So each case may be different. That's why, I'm trying to give not an yes and no answer, but more prescriptive to what matches to one's needs.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, KL. So next question is, what are the gaps that you see mostly while implementation in any of the organization? I mean, just the overview if you can.
Sunil, you want to pick up this one?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So what are the gaps that we mostly see while implementation in any of the organization?
Okay, so from a client perspective, right, some of the gaps that you've seen, I think some of the points we definitely touched base in this presentation. One is people identification and people readiness. I think a lot of people actually do not take this factor into consideration, saying that, okay, we have a strong SI who can actually do it and all of that. But I think that becomes very, very crucial when you're actually doing projects of this scale and size. We definitely need people who actually know the business, who have been in the business, and also actually giving time. That is first. The second thing is when you're actually going into a project of this size and scale, especially if you're a company, if you have a specific business processes that is unique to your company. If you think that, okay, this process is very unique and actually is the heart of my operation, I think those business processes should be actually well documented before you start this project. Otherwise, what happens is if you actually have a very, very custom process that only that is either industry specific or company specific, or it can be combination of both. And if you're actually bringing in SI, obviously SI will come up with SAP and some business knowledge, which is standard business knowledge. But I think it'll take some time for them to understand if you do not have proper documentation and all of that. And also that plays a big role because most often than not, SAP might not have a standard solution for that, even in the cloud version and the latest release as well. So I think it makes sense for us to actually bring that old solution into S4 HANA, probably automate that a little bit, which we actually did for one of the clients. But lack of documentation on your company specific processes or industry specific processes will definitely hurt. I think in the planning stage, if you can identify those processes where you think that these processes are very, very unique to my company, and I think it makes sense for you to document that and also have a conversation with SI how much of that SAP can accommodate in the new version. If it is not, then probably think about strategy. How do you actually take that old solution and implement it into your new design? Okay. So that I think is very, very important.
Right. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you for answering that. I see we have answered a couple of questions, and in the interest of time, by not exceeding it, I would like to express my gratitude to the experts for their presence and contribution to make this webinar a great success. We were fascinated by what we learned today. For any more questions, please do connect us on info@yash.com. That is info@yash.com.
Yeah. And last but not the least, right? So Yash has a practice for S4 implementations and rollout, which is thriving, and there are very few companies out in the market who have this experience. So we are that part of that small group of expert SIs. We can help you in your specific cases. So as Naveen mentioned, reach out to us at info@yash.com and we'll be more than happy to help in your journey. Thank you. Have a great day.
We can move to the next slide, Uddhav, if in case somebody wants to make a note of the email address.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for joining. See you folks next time.